I was not planning on making this video, but after the travel nightmare that I just endured leaving or attempting to leave the Gili Islands, I feel like I have no choice. These are the 7 things you should not do if you're planning to visit the Gili Islands in Indonesia. If you watched my last vlog when I went to Gili T and Gili Air with my best friend Liana, if you got to the very end of that video, then you would have seen that we had a very abrupt ending to the video. 1 minute we were having a lovely brunch and exploring Gili Air for our last morning on the island, and the next I was here in this Lombok hotel by myself, stuck here, essentially. Haven't been able to get back to Bali yet because of the weather. And I decided to make this video so that you can avoid the nightmare that me, Liana, and many other people on the Gili Islands just experienced. Let's jump right into the number 1 thing that you should not do in the Gili Islands, and that is expecting things to go to plan, specifically when it comes to transportation. Basically what happened was we were planning to take the Ekajaya fast boat from Gili Air to Padang Bai in Bali. I decided to go check in super early to the ticketing office because it was right there at about 11:35 a.m. and they informed me upon asking them about this boat that it was in fact canceled. Why? Because around the time that I'm filming this, it has been absolutely torrentially downpouring in Bali, in Lombok, and the surrounding islands. And on this particular day, and still today, the weather was way too bad and the government basically canceled all marine traffic. So the last boat leaving the Gili Islands on this particular day was leaving in 25 minutes. Liana, my best friend who I was with at the time, she had a 3 p.m. international flight out of Bali the next day, and we were about to get stuck in Gili Air for at least the next 24 hours because usually the boats don't depart from the islands until around 11 a.m. So we literally had to sprint back to our Airbnb. Liana is throwing our bikes onto a horse cart, running to our Airbnb, getting all of our bags that thank God we had packed, while I was talking to the ticketing office and they were telling me, okay, she has a flight. Look at Lombok. Does Lombok have any flights? Obviously they didn't. There were no flights out of Lombok to Bali, to Kuala Lumpur, to Jakarta. And basically the guy who was really helpful, he helped us book a private driver that would take us from where we're going in Lombok, driving us down to the Lombok airport and hopefully finding a flight for Liana so that she could make it out of the country. We ended up getting on this boat about 10 minutes late. They held it because so many people were in the same boat. There were people crying, sitting on the curb because there were no flights and they were going to miss their connecting or international flight or whatever it was. It was a total shit show, for lack of a better word. But we did get on this boat. We made it to the harbor in Lombok, got in the private car, and Liana was able to book the last seat on a flight to Singapore while we were in the car. Thank God. I was waiting on word to see if the ferry out in Lembar got canceled, and it did. So I have been in this Lombok hotel last night, and I'm going to be here tonight as well. But that all to say, when you plan to leave the Gili Islands, even if you have a round trip ticket booked like we did, there is no guarantee that it's going to actually happen. So the number 1 thing you should not do is book any kind of flight or really important event or something within 24 hours of leaving the Gili Islands. You want to give yourself a 24-hour, if not more, buffer, especially if you come during rainy season. It's not rainy season right now, but we do obviously have a huge band of rain that has been nonstop for the last week. So I can imagine in the rainy season, this happens all the time. And that leads me into my second point, which is do not arrive at your boat when it's supposed to leave on time. You need to arrive at least 30 minutes to an hour early. A lot of the times these companies tend to oversell their boats, and if people arrive late or on time, there may not be room and then you have to buy another ticket. That happens a pretty decent amount. So in order to avoid that, try and arrive 30 minutes to an hour beforehand, check in, and then kind of walk around, grab some food, and then get to your boat 10 minutes before its departure time so that you can get on and everything's good. But yeah, my personal recommendation is to go just stop by the ticket office a few hours before you're supposed to leave, like I did, because if I didn't do that, we would have still been on Gili Air right now. Now, the third thing that you should not do, that of course I did, is lose your paper return ticket. In the Gili Islands, they don't really do many things digitally. So even when I showed them the receipt of the ticket that I bought, they wouldn't let me get on boat. I mean, it got canceled, so it was fine. But yeah, I somehow lost the paper return ticket that they gave me when I bought it. And you will have to buy another ticket if you don't have it. So keep that somewhere safe, keep it with your passport, and have that ready to go when you leave for your departure boat. So those first 3 tips were basically how to avoid total travel nightmare. The rest of these tips I actually was just thinking through, and these are actually really good tips to know ahead of time before coming to the Gili Islands. So the first thing is, do not come without cash. There are ATMs on all of the islands. There is only one on Gili Mino. There are a few on Gili Air and a decent amount on Gili T, but there's no guarantee that they actually are going to have cash in them. So yeah, when you're on Gili Air, we had tried like 3 or 4 different ATMs all over the island, and all of them were out of cash, even though it was, I think, a Monday or a Tuesday. So we ended up pulling out cash when we went to Gili Mino for the day. But definitely do not come to the Gili Islands without a good amount of cash. Places do take card, a lot of restaurants and some bars, but cash is definitely much preferred. So just make sure that you have at least, I'd say like 1.5 million IDR on you, depending on how long you're planning to stay. The next thing is, don't ride the horse carts if you can. So on the Gili Islands, they've actually banned motorized vehicles like cars and trucks and stuff like that. Everyone is biking around. That is definitely the #1 way to get around the islands, is riding a bike. Usually for me, they cost 50K a day for 24 hours. And the other way to get around the island is on horse carts. You can kind of tell that the horses, especially on Gili T, are not happy. They're definitely overworked. They're out in the hot sun all day and all night even. I didn't see any of them drinking water. Their coats weren't shiny. They were kind of foaming at the mouth on Gili T. We went to Gili Air. They definitely looked better. And Gili Mino, they looked even better. So it just goes to show that the more crowded the island, the more overworked they are. So yeah, if you can help it, try and stay somewhere that's closer to the boat ramp so that you can walk to your accommodation. If you stay somewhere a little bit further that you don't want to drag all of your stuff to, please don't shove all of your things and every person in your party onto one cart. Try and break it up into 2 or 3 horse carts just to reduce the load for them, because yeah, I was just watching these horses and they were struggling and it was really hard to watch. I do know that there are efforts being made to improve the quality of life for these horses. There's a couple nonprofits that I have seen, but yeah, just overall, you know, if you're going to ride them, just try and be mindful of how much weight you're putting in the cart. The next thing that I don't recommend doing is bringing a rolling suitcase to the Gili Islands. The roads on every island are what the Indonesians call broken roads. And it's super hard to drag your suitcase along the dirt roads or roads that kind of have asphalt on them, but they're super cracked. Yeah, it's just not the best place for a big rolling suitcase. I had my backpack and it was obviously super easy to just go to and from, walk around. Liana had a rolling suitcase, but she was always a few yards behind me. So just for convenience purposes, I recommend bringing a backpack over any kind of rolling suitcase. And the last thing is kind of a fun thing, but do not skip out on the snorkeling. I feel like this is a given, but I just want to hammer this home, especially if you go to Gili T and you start to get wrapped up in the party scene that's there. It can be super fun to do that, but the snorkeling at the Gili Islands is insane. I have snorkeled all over the Komodo Islands. Liana has gone to Komodo and Nusa Penida, and we both said that the Gili Islands was definitely at the top. The most popular snorkel tour to do is the 3-day island tour. Typically, you can expect to pay anywhere from $40 to $80 for a private boat. Ours was 4 hours, actually ended up being about 4.5 hours. Just with me and Liana, we had a private boat that provided all of the snorkel equipment. We had a guide that came around and used my GoPro, but he also had his own GoPro to shoot some amazing photos and videos of us with the sea turtles swimming around in the coral. It was such a fun experience. And on this trip, you will go to Gili Mino to have some lunch on the beach and then go and see the baby turtles. But the snorkeling around Gili Mino is insane. Obviously, you have the infamous underwater statues that are really cool to see. It's very, very crowded. So if you want to have it all to yourself, I actually recommend staying on Gili and going out really early in the morning. It's like a 5-minute swim offshore of Gili. That's kind of the only way to avoid the crowds because it was pretty insane. All of the boat tours go here. And for that tour, me, Liana, booked it through Airbnb Experience. I'll put the name of our guide and his contact info on the screen and in the description. He was so amazing. We each paid $50 for the tour, but they, I think, accommodate up to like 7 or 8 people on the boat. So the more people come, the lower it will cost for an individual person. But yeah, you have to go snorkeling if you come to the Gili Islands. But anyways, that is it for this short and sweet video. I really hope that this helps you avoid some of the travel catastrophes that may come. Honestly, these tips very much apply to a lot of places in terms of just don't expect things to always go to plan. Have a backup plan, give yourself a buffer. All of these things are just really good things to keep in mind. So yeah, if you have any other questions, make sure to comment them down below. Make sure you go watch my Gili Islands vlog if you haven't already. We spent 2 nights in Gili T and 2 nights in Gili Air, and also went to Gili for the day. So I give you my honest impressions and take you through the entire experience. And despite us having a bit of a travel nightmare at the end of it, it was still totally worth it. I would do it again and again. But that is it for today's video. I hope you found it helpful. If you did, please give it a like. Super easy, and it really, really supports me. Wish me luck getting back to Bali, hopefully tomorrow. And I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!